Just stop it. The run-of-the-mill, cheesy, humdrum bullshit status quo just tires me out. What fascinates me are the industry disruptors, the superhuman frontiersmen or women who go through hell to achieve their goals. Join me as we meet and learn from those mavericks, rebels, and business leaders that aren't afraid to piss off the establishment in order to make radical change for good. Sponsored by Johto PR, the disruptive anti-PR firm that murders your competition with cinder blocks and cyanide. This is Disruption Interruption.
I'll start recording.
Okay.
And we can edit this. I never have to edit hardly, but we'll edit. All right. So I'm going to introduce you. Welcome back, everybody, to Disruption Interruption. I'm your host, KJ, and we're here today to talk to another industry leader that has steered off the lame, tired path of the status quo. Today's guest has been disrupting for over 2 decades. She doesn't look it. She's disrupting the way recruiting and HR work. But why are we talking to her today? We hear every day that companies of every size and industry across nearly every state are facing unprecedented challenges in trying to find enough workers to fill open jobs. And we've had a lot of layoffs, right?
Yeah.
But right now, the latest data shows that we have over 10 million job openings in the U.S., but only 5.7 million unemployed workers. Right now, the labor force participation rate is 62%. It's down from 63% in February 2020. Now, that's 1%, but when you're talking about, big numbers, that's a big percentage. It is clear that able workers are being overlooked or sitting on the sidelines. And there's lots of reasons, but today we're going to discuss one, maybe more than one. But part of it is that HR recruitment today is automated with no real understanding of who the candidate is. How can they be authentic? Our guest today is disrupting and helping HR understand what makes a human really marketable. Clients like Ericsson and Amazon are listening to her, and she tells them, enough already. Stop doing the same old things. Coming to us live from Oakland, California, please welcome our disruptor, founder at Corporate and Color Consulting, Gem Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hello.
Hi.
Jim, let's get going. I want to discuss this whole HR thing. I want to really break it down. Before we do, I want you to tell us your foundational ingredient for yourself for disruptive innovation. What is that for you?
Being authentic, being me. I think I spent the first 10 years of my career trying to be what corporate America told me I needed to be. That is in every aspect of the word. And I finally realized I was incredibly unhappy. Personal note, I was a single mom and I never had time for my son. I mean, other than feeding him and maybe helping him with his homework, but I was just working. And I have nothing, no issue with working, to the bone. I really kind of enjoy it, honestly, but I wasn't getting what I needed and I wasn't happy. And in about 10 years, I got laid off from a company that recruited me heavily. And obviously I had all the emotions attached to it, feeling betrayed and all that kind of good stuff. And I just decided I started to invest in myself. I made the decision to start to work for myself. And I went inside internal recruiting and I actually got picked out by one of my previous clients and went in-house. And that was my first stint at, startup and all that kind of good stuff. And I just really realized that it was me and my value and my philosophies and my non-automated recruiting style that really got me to that level, and making that decision, I almost tripled my income, just in one decision. And it was just really like kind of just ripping the Band-Aid off and saying, wait, I'm really good at what I do. And why am I trying to do something that makes me incredibly unhappy and doesn't really jive with me? And I had to put on a mask almost every day. And then I just realized, be you, be who you are and bring that to the table. And the folks that you're supposed to work with, it'll happen. And the folks that you're not missing out on anything because you would have been miserable. So that's a long-winded answer, but I mean, it's really that deep, and it's really something that I scream from mountaintops to anyone and everyone. Be yourself. You're not going to do anyone any justice by trying to portray a certain kind of aura, whatever the case is. Be who you are.
Love that. I absolutely love that. And I think that's easier said than done. But when you do rip the Band-Aid off and you are really authentic, it is totally free.
It very much so. Very much.
I've heard other disruptors talk about this corporate culture, and of course I've seen it, right? That people have felt like they've needed to be in a mold, and that mold can be very caustic. It can create an asshole environment. I have clients today that absolutely will not have that in their startups. They refuse to do that in their startups. But we have this culture of AR there's this paradigm shift happening. And I think the biggest thing, and you tell me if this is right, but this is from looking from an outside lens, right? I feel like HR has had certain processes and automations and things in place for such a long time. And this is the culprit culture. And it's actually been molded from military, if you didn't know that, military organizing boards to corporate. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? But now they're looking at things aren't working, right? And they're being called on the carpet for not having enough diversity and inclusion, and they, pick, something that they think it is. And so they get on the bandwagon. Tell me what it's really like in HR today with all this diversity and inclusion. What's really going on?
Shit. I'm like, I don't know how else to be more eloquent. My apologies, but it is exactly what you said. It's all of those things, and it's a front, for lack of a better word. I'm sorry, I'm from the Bay, so I'm gonna keep it as real as possible. It's all kind of like for show, in the sense of, oh, diversity inclusion matters. I'm like, I've been in this industry for 25 fucking years, and I'm brown, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Mexican. I come from where I come from, and I've been here. I didn't just pop up in the last 2-3 years. It's a lot of what I've found in all sizes of companies, like the last 10-15 years, I've probably focused more so on startups. That's just because that's what I enjoy. I enjoy the environment, the challenge, the impact, all that kind of good stuff. And that's really fun because you get to kind of have those conversations right at the door versus in the midst of, chaos, so to speak.
Well, they're developing their culture.
Exactly.
They're probably highly open to it. I mean, I know our clients are. They might be fast growth on great trajectories, but they are building their culture, aren't they?
Exactly. And I found what's really refreshing about that exact same point is that they are very open to it, and they're having the conversations, and they're asking, why am I not getting more DE&I candidates? Why am I not, this? And it's breaking things down to the granular level of analytics. And I mean, this is deep. This is deep in the sense of like what I consult clients on is, everything down to the job description, not using absolutes, because that doesn't appeal to women, especially women of color. People of color. We don't
give me an example. Give me an example of that. Not down to absolutes, and what doesn't resonate with them.
Calling yourself a rock star, putting that in job descriptions. What? That doesn't equate, mandatory, degrees when so many times you don't need a degree. I personally do not have a degree. Don't get me wrong. I am not opposed to degrees. I paid for my son to get his degree with a lot of money. But, my point is that it's kind of a lot of the things that you said, like things have just been this way. And so kind of like drones, the rest of the society has just kind of followed suit and not asked questions.
So it's almost like they look at a resume and they look for keywords, like rock star. Is that what they like? Rock star
and doing a buzzword search within the resume. I've never been one of my biggest kind of prideful things, I guess. I don't know what else to call it. I've never been a buzzword recruiter. Never. I actually look at a resume. I don't spend tons of time on it, but I actually look for the story of the individual, and whatever kind of piques my interest, I kind of go from there.
I love this. Hold on one second. You said something really key. The story of the individual. Yeah, resumes don't tell stories.
They should.
I mean, they're so like cold.
Automated. Yeah, no, they're 100% automated. And I don't want to derail, but that's exactly why I launched my company. But anyhow, the story, everybody has a story, regardless of what your background is, regardless of education. We all have something that uniquely drives us, that we uniquely have as far as gifts are concerned, that equates to our value, all of those things. One of the primary keys of my recruiting is, I believe, content of experience versus years of experience. What I mean by that is, you see a job description that says, 5 years of this, that, whatever. I mean, I kind of see it all over the place. There was one, it was on LinkedIn. I literally live on LinkedIn, but
that's how we met.
I do. It's up all the time. Anyhow, he posted, so I applied to this job and they said you needed 3 years of this certain language, and I don't remember what it was. And he's like, pretty funny because I created the language. I think it was Go. I don't remember, but he's like, it's only been out for a year. Like, and maybe it wasn't, maybe it was Golang. I don't remember, but I just, oh my God, if I could like just post that to the world and just say, but nobody's asking the questions, nobody's pushing back. And as a recruiter, that is my whole mentality, is that I'm a true consultant. Recruiters should approach the job as being consultants, and that the market, the candidate market, the client has certain needs and, trajectories and goals and butts to, seats to fill, I should say. So then you tell them, okay, we want to do this and we want to, maintain our brand and our culture and all these kinds of things. You got to do all the work at the beginning, and you have to set the standards and the guidelines to be able to get what you need in the end. And that's identifying the job description. That's identifying, are you going to push back on me when I give you somebody who doesn't have a degree? Because frankly, they don't need a degree. Some of the best engineers that I've ever placed are self-taught.
Right.
And having those conversations and that kind of mentality of an engineer, to me, is amazing, because they're literally like, I'm not going to let this computer win. I'm going to figure this out. And that is literally the true depth.
And they're some of the best engineers.
Absolutely.
Because they are self-taught.
Exactly. And because they think like that. They think like, I'm providing a solution. I'm going to fix this problem. And that is what an engineer is supposed to do. So it's literally bringing all of that data to whoever your client is and letting them know, did you think about this? Did you think about that? And I'll ask the questions. Why do we have 10 languages on this? That doesn't even make sense as far as like the ability to do the work. You know what I'm saying? But it's not asking the questions. It's not pushing back. And sometimes that's not giving your client, whether it's your candidate and or hiring managers, C-level suite, whoever, really the nuts and bolts of what is going to help them do their job and get the job done. So ultimately, how do I disrupt that? It's by asking questions and by pushing back and by bringing maybe a different kind of level of thinking, connected with it, and broadening that up. Like, I literally remember it was a startup in Oakland, and the founders were both from Chicago and they were in Oakland. And long story short, they come from huge organizations, professional services, I think. And I kept on getting pushback from the CPO in regards to candidates. And we were trying to build out, a huge team and all this stuff. And he's like, well, I want to do, probably have like talk to eight candidates and then make a decision. And I stopped and I looked at the CEO and I looked at him and I just said, the Bay isn't going to allow you to do that. That's just not going to happen. And you have to be appreciative of that. And I don't understand why you think that you're allotted that time, and he said, well, that's what we used to do at such and such company. I'm not going to name it, and I said, and how did that work out for you? I said, there is literally no data that says if you conduct more interviews or if you go through 10 versus 5 people, that you're going to get a better candidate. There's none. I've looked forward to kind of prove my point, if you will. And then he came up with, well, why do people wait for Google? And I said, first of all, what Google does doesn't work. And this was like 3 years ago. Okay, I've never been a FANGs fan by no means. I said, what Google does doesn't work. I said, if it did, they wouldn't have most of the job postings on LinkedIn. Have you ever thought about that?
No, and tell me why that is. Why wouldn't they have it if it was working?
If it was working, they wouldn't have any open seats, number one. Number two, they hire the same person over and over again.
They do.
And number three, they want to act like they're so progressive, but at the end of the day, look at how they handled their layoffs. That's the character of an organization. You know, you literally told people who worked for you for 14 years, okay, thanks, bye. What? You know, that's like being married to somebody and just, you know, sending them a text and saying, I want a divorce.
It's true.
You know, it's just, that's
What do you
literally-
think is it like, is the chicken and the egg? Do you think it needs to change with the candidate level, or do you think it needs to change at the HR level? At the HR level. Okay, good. Because candidates could push back and they could be disruptive and they could be innovative and they could tell their story, but the percentage of those guys getting through, which I still think they should do it, but the percentage of the guys getting through is going to be less if we don't change the mindset of HR.
Absolutely. And it's again, it's having all of those preconceived notions that this works, you know, and it doesn't. And that is literally the telltale signs of, you know, you mentioned earlier, you know, automation and all those kinds of things is doing things without thinking, doing things without having conversations, you know, as far as the market trends are concerned. I was consulting for a company, a robotics organization last year. Yeah, for about 8 months last year until the end of December. And the market completely has changed from what it was 6 months ago, a year ago to then. You know, it was very, 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 very much so a candidate driven kind of situation. The salaries were different. Everything was just different, you know, and so I myself had to make adjustments to that and kind of figure out what within reason, because I don't want to completely change, you know, how I go about things, but I definitely have to be open to what works and what not works and all those kinds of things to be able to get my client the results. So it's a constant readjustment. And what I find is that most companies don't make the readjustments, or they think like, now there's layoffs, so I should be able to get, you know, cheaper labor. People still have the same bills. Now, granted, some of the salaries were crazy, like just crazy, you know, and I was just like, I'm always pro candidate. I'm always going to give you what you're worth. I'm not going to say, well, our budget is this and that. I'm very transparent when it comes to money, because I would never want anybody to do that to me, you know. But at the same token, you know, you have to play within the rules, you know, so to speak. And having the mindset that we're going to get cheaper labor because of layoffs isn't going to get you what you want. And at the same token, you have to remember within recruiting, it goes in ebb and flows. So what goes around comes around. You know, I see so many times on LinkedIn recruiters, oh, I can't respond, I'm too busy. That's your job. What?
Right?
What? You're kind of complaining because you have too many people reaching out to you? Like, I just was completely blown away. Okay, well, so then when the market changes, don't be surprised when such and such candidate isn't going to give you the time of day, because I guarantee you that will happen. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen the changes and the ebb and flows and the just everything in between. And you just don't want to, number one, you don't want to blackball a recruiter, because you don't want to break that bridge, I should say, because they will blackball you. They will. I have, you know, so you want to keep that in mind. It's bigger than just connecting the dots that are in front of you, you know. And
right.
I think a lot of companies and people within those companies, they don't see that. They're just doing 1 + 1 = 2 instead of, no, I need to get to 100.
They have quotas. They have people that they have to hire. They have to fill these jobs. They go with what they think has been successful before. And now we have this DE&I thing on top of it. So they put another check mark in there and it's a token. Let's talk about, at the end of the day, what does it really matter as far as DE&I?
Matters like I'm alive. It matters.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as companies, like they're at the end of the day, companies are what? They're trying to make money, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to make money. And we look at it as, you know, people are human, right? This is authentic. This is like diversity. This is inclusion. This is equity, right? But businesses look at it, or should look at it, from the viewpoint of, you know, they're going to make money. That's what they want, right?
That's the one thing that I always bring to my clients. That's my first kind of approach, if you will, is that the one thing that I can guarantee you with expanding on diversity inclusion is you're going to make more money. And there's reasons for that.
Okay, let's get to the reasons, because let's get to the reasons, because it's not just a nice to have.
No,
it's actually vital.
It's absolutely vital. Number one, it's going to increase your customer base, because they're going to see, the first thing that I look at is I look at leadership when I look at a company. what does that look like? Because that tells me a lot about, it can tell me, I'm not going to say, that if everybody there is male or white or whatever, that if they're not progressive, I'm not going to say that, because I've come across those kinds of organizations with that kind of leadership, so it's not like, well, if they look like this, then this is what it is. That's being biased, So my point is that it's either gonna increase your branding, which is huge, especially if you're a startup, which equates to more money and equates to being more attractive as an organization, which again equates to money. So every line that you go through, every reason for it equates to money. The result, the goal, not even the goal, it just happens. A huge thing that I consult companies on, kind of go after it, like I call it a tripod effect. It's branding, culture, and diversity and inclusion. Because if you are conscientious of your branding, it's going to affect your culture, and your culture is going to affect your DE&I. And so
and vice versa. Any one of those points would affect each other, right?
Exactly. And that is the whole point. And so, okay, what's our branding? Who are we? Who are we trying to be? Okay, our culture isn't set up by leadership. Our culture is set up by our internal team, and what is that? Have we asked the question? And I don't ask C-suite. I ask the team members, why here? What got you here? What are some of the things and the traits that you really enjoy about here? And it's like, feel like I have a voice. I feel like I don't feel like I'm not welcomed. Just all of those intangible things are what make a company progressive and what make kind of things on an even playing field, if you will. And those are the things that attribute to why someone will stay there, even if they're offered a job that's $10,000, $20,000 more. At the end of the day, people want to work with and within an organization that, number one, they feel there's camaraderie, they feel that they're being valued, they feel like what they're doing matters, and they feel like they have a say. And there's no paycheck that can equate that. Believe me, I know, because I've worked at the Amazons, I've worked at the Corn Fairs, I've worked, at the bigger organizations that try to throw RSUs and all that kind of good stuff. And look at the end of the day, look at what happened. So there is value in the intangibles, and that is literally what I lead with. And that is literally
that. I love that.
Thank you.
Let's do a mic drop for that. There are values in there's value in the intangibles. What are the intangibles do you have a checklist like that you tell HR professionals and startups to look for when they're doing their recruitment, when they're doing their job descriptions, when they're putting out their ads?
Well, I go through the process. I don't come in and say, well, this is wrong. I don't do any of that. I ask what's working, what's not working, And sometimes it'll be like, Gem, we've had this job description out for, 3 months and we're just not getting the level. And so I'll look at the job description and they're like, we're getting no women, we're getting no folks from, different kinds of backgrounds, LGBTQ, any of that. And so like, okay, so let's look at that and we'll look at it together. And I'll, literally go through, if you have words like rock star, if you have words that are attached to absolutes, like you have to have a degree, you have to have 3 years of experience, you have to whatever. All of those things are complete deterrents to especially women and especially people of color. Because
now, why is that? Why is that? Especially women and people of color?
I say that because we women, especially women of color, carry this, I don't want to be found out. And it's tied to the imposter syndrome. It's tied to systematic oppression. It's tied to so many things. But, where a man will be like, I only got 2 years of experience. And it's not even connected with the actual role, but heck it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply. Where a woman's mentality or a person of an ethnic background is like, well, I don't, we will literally talk ourselves out of it. And that is absolute. You could take that to the bank, KJ. You can take that to the bank because that is one of the things that absolutely happens. I tell people all the time on LinkedIn, they'll post a job and I'm like, you may want to get this word out because it's not going to appeal. You're saying diversity and inclusion is important and your job description is shit. Who told you to do this?
The industry.
That's what I want to know. And who told you that it works? Again, they're like sheep, and this is where the automation comes in, not thinking, not questioning, not pushing back, not being disruptive.
So no absolutes. And that makes total sense. But who would have thunk?
Exactly.
Right? No absolutes. I totally get it. How do you get people to how do you pull out of a story out of a resume, or how do you get people to put their story in there? And why does that matter?
Yeah. So I'm gonna
break it down for me, Jim.
So it matters because everybody has one. Okay. Career tied into personal, everybody has one. Everybody has special value. Everybody has unique gifts. If you're a project manager, there's something within project management that you may do really well. There's some things that you may not do really well. So the story is incredibly important because it tells me kind of, as a recruiter, it tells me who you are, you know, and I can kind of understand. Let me give you a really quick example.
Yeah.
So I had one of my first career consulting clients. She was a Puerto Rican native, and she had moved, her and her family had moved from Puerto Rico to, I think, I don't know, Seattle or somewhere. And it was after a huge, horrible tornado, you know, I don't remember when, and she's like, and then we had to move here, and then we had to move here. And she's like, you know, I don't want to talk about that. And I said, stop. I said, that tells me so much about who you are. The fact, because I've done this, I know not everybody can do it. Most people that move from one place into another have to be incredibly resourcul
and adaptive.
They have to figure it out. They got to just kind of get it done.
Meet people.
Yeah. Exactly. You know, and so she just looked at me and she's like, really? Because she was somewhat ashamed of this, ashamed of the fact that, you know, she had to move around and she was, you know, displaced, if you will. And, you know, and I said, no. I said, girl, you got to highlight that. That's part of your story. I said, and honestly, if I saw your resume, I said, I would hire you in a heartbeat because of that, because it tells me about your character. And so many times people talk about skills, and don't get me wrong, those things are very important, obviously. But at the end of the day, I want to know what you do. I want to know what the impact of what you do is. That's all tied into your story. You know, like I said, you could be an incredible project manager, but you suck at metrics, you know? Okay, fine. So then you give that off to somebody on your team. You know, everybody isn't good at everything. Like,
awesome. I mean, I'm writing this whole like template for an ad here. It's like, you know, what is your story, right? Yeah. What is your story? What, you know, how has that contributed to your special values, your unique gifts? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? It's totally okay to say what it is, right? Not everybody's great at what they do. What's the impact of what you do? Do people like to talk about what they're most proud of? Because that also tells a story.
You know what? In the process of being a career coach, you know, I ask them 3 primary questions. I ask them, what do you do? What don't you want to do? And what you would like to do. And I keep that very open-ended, I should say, for a very specific reason. Number one, because I'm not going to lead you to tell me what's important to you. Does that make sense? I want you to tell me what you think is important. And sometimes what you're good at isn't what you enjoy, and vice versa. So I ask those questions on purpose so that you can tell me what's important. And if you give me, I've had some clients who literally spend 2 minutes on it. And my rule is don't spend more than an hour, because then you get into overthinking and that defeats the purpose. Don't do that. I want you just to kind of verbally vomit, for lack of a better term, on what you want to do, what don't you want to do, and what you like to do. You know, some people are like, I want to manage a department. I don't want to manage people. I hate babysitting. And that's a huge differentiator. That's a huge thing, you know? And so understanding that and understanding what they do really well and what they want to continue on doing is incredibly important. So to answer your question, once they get out of their own way, yes, because so many times I can't tell you, and it does not matter the background of an individual. Gem, my biggest hurdle is that I can't brag about myself. It's not bragging. I tell my clients all the time, you need to look at your impact and what you do and build it out as it's like the color of your eyes. If your eyes are brown, you own it. This is just who you are. This is a part of your makeup. So it's not bragging. You're going to brag that you have brown eyes. Do you know what I'm saying? And so we work to put all of this information in a very impactful document that they can speak to. It builds their confidence, kind of makes them look at what they do a little bit different, and really kind of, I say this to the nth degree, own what you do, own your accolades, own the value that you bring, own the gifts. A really quick side note, I just recently ended with a VP client, and he he was overwhelmingly trying to prove that he was, a guy's guy, and he, you could like him, and he was human. And I was like, dude, tone it down. Like, and came to the core of, I'm like, why are you trying to be this, this buddy? You're at a VP level. If they can't deal with your intimidation, or they can't deal with how you do or get shit done, that's their problem. At this level, that's their problem. And you need to have no apologies and go about it. Well, come to find out that he had a mentor about 10, 15 years ago that told him that he intimidated people. And so he completely went to the different
to the dark side.
Yeah. And it was like, I'm going to be everybody's friend. And I was like, that's not your job. Your job is to lead, is to strategize, and to get results for the company.
Yeah, he probably just shed a ton of weight just by taking that fixed idea off of his plate, right?
And he literally was like, Gem, I never thought of it that way. And I'm like, well, you need to start now. You're a VP.
Own it.
So
own it. Own it. I love it. All right. So when did you have your epiphany? When did you have your that's it moment? Something's got to change. What was it?
It was when I got laid off from the company that recruited me. I was working for an agency. The first 10 years of my career, I had worked for recruiting agencies and went that route. I didn't really know that we had an option, to do anything else. Recruiting agency is very churn and burn. And I'm a person that the money will come as long as as long as I feel valued in what I do. I've never been a dollar chaser in the sense of chasing after it to chase after it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to feel good about a big paycheck if I don't feel like I've done something impactful to somebody's life, And so recruiting in an agency, it's always, contract, put 30 people to work and move on to the next thing. And I was never good at that. I didn't care about it. I didn't feel like I was providing value. And this company brought me on to specifically drive their kind of backyard business, which was startups in San Francisco. And there's something that I understood. I understood the culture really well. I understood how to get to the culture and understanding those questions and making those right fits, because again, intangibles provide value, and I was dealing with, other recruiters who were doing the buzzword searches. I've never done that. I wanted to understand who these people were and why they're a good fit and all that kind of good stuff. When I got laid off, I had literally just made the biggest placement in the company's history. The company was 15 years old, KJ. And I had just made the biggest placement. It was ridiculous. It was for a senior node developer, I remember. And everybody was just like, how did you do this? And it was just, I did it my way. I cultivated the relationship with this candidate who said, I'm never going to work for another company and all these things. And long story short, made the placement, and I hadn't made any contract placements. And the president of the company and the partners decided that I just wasn't bringing enough money in the sense of what their standards were. I was bringing money in, but it wasn't to what they wanted to see. When I got laid off, I started doing what I traditionally do and started applying to agencies, all over again. And I was miserable in the application, but it's kind of like, if you only eat chicken, you don't know that there's, salmon and shrimp and, and all this other really good stuff that's good for you. And somebody serves it to you, you're just like, holy shit, this is good.
This is amazing.
Right? And so then I saw a posting with a previous client of mine, and they were a full-time client, meaning that they only wanted full-time people, not contracting. And I applied, and they're like, oh my God, Gem, we'd love to talk to you. Blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I got the job. And we had the conversation. She's like, okay, so what's your rate? And you talk about anxiety. You talk about just...
This was your first out of you had gotten laid off your first job.
This is my first, I got to go work for myself, 1099, all that kind of good stuff. And I'm just racking my brain. I hadn't been working for 3 or 4 months. And, anyways, so I came up with a number, and I'm like, this will get us over the hump, so to speak. And I was like, she's going to freaking laugh at me. I just had all these worst case scenarios in my head. I gave her the number, and she's like, without hesitation, oh, great, that's within our budget. I'll send her the contract ASAP. We can start. When can you start again?
Yay!
So that was my aha moment. That was what the heck have I been doing? These last 10 years, trying to fit in, trying to build numbers out, most of the time lying, because I just didn't care about this work, but I was trying with every heart in me to care about it. And the thing of it was that I was good at recruiting. I just wasn't good at that kind of recruiting. And I had to figure that out for myself. And I had to had a come to Jesus conversation with myself and be like, okay, girl, what is it? And what is it that you want to continue to do? And that's kind of the same conversation that I had with myself when I launched my company. I still recruit and I still, consult companies, but, my passion is helping the individual and kind of giving back, if you will, to that, because it literally blows me away at the level of, and I hate using this term just because it's so saturated, but imposter syndrome and all of those things that we put in our head, all of the monkeys on our back, if you will, that we carry, and because I've been through the journey that I've been through and I put myself through what I did, I'm able to have a lot of empathy towards the reasons why people are doing this. And I understand it and I can identify with it, and I'll tell them straight out, you're getting in your own way. You're this, you're that. I'm very, very direct. I don't hold any punches back because I just don't feel like you didn't engage with me at any level to kind of sugarcoat it. That's not going to get you the result that you want. You're dealing with someone who has insight into this crazy industry and can give you that if you're willing to learn. Like I've had one or two clients who've pushed back at all different levels. And I'm like, okay, well, have a nice life. Best of luck to you, and they'll come back and they'll be like, oh my God.
You were right.
Yeah. Oh my God, this or that, or they'll send me a message. Can we talk? And I'm like, no problem. My door is always open, but
we're very, very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Yes. If I was going to distill a message throughout all of this, you really on both sides of the coin are disrupting the automation of DE&I, because those are two words that don't go together or two terms that don't go together. So well done for you. How do people get a hold of you, Gem? How do they find you? We already know that you live on LinkedIn.
Well, LinkedIn is one, definitely. You can always, just shoot me an email at gem@corporate in color, and it's COLOUR consulting.com. I'm probably going to change that because it's very difficult. My website is in production, so to speak, right now. I'm probably going to change the domain, but yeah, literally LinkedIn is probably the best way to get hold of me. I'm Gem A. Garcia at Corporate in Color Consulting. Yeah, please reach out. I definitely would love to help. It's just a matter of having a chat or whatever it is. I'm definitely willing and hopefully.
Well, we already know that you're willing.
Yeah.
Even on the flows, the ebbs and the flows, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much. That was awesome. I love what you're doing. Great story.
Thank you. All right.
That's a wrap, everyone. If you learned something today or laughed with Jim and me, go tell someone about this podcast. Go tell people to disrupt their markets with a tidbit from this show. Thank you for listening to Disruption Interruption, where we transform lives, change consumer behavior, alter economics, and never accept the status quo. Ciao for now.
Because we live in a highly litigious society, with America being one of the top litigious countries in the world, here's our legal disclaimer. This information is not intended to be a substitute for professional public relations or legal advice. Do not disregard seeking professional, legal, healthcare, or financial advice, or delay seeking professional PR or legal advice because of something you have heard here. Contact an attorney to obtain advice on any particular legal situation or problem. Use of this podcast or our website or any of its social media or email links do not create an agency-client relationship between Johto PR and the user.